Welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote comes from someone who is remembered primarily as a martial artist and film icon, but who was quietly and seriously one of the more original philosophical thinkers of the 20th century. And the quote itself contains a twist that catches most people off guard the first time they really hear it. A wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer. That's Bruce Lee, martial artist, actor, filmmaker, and philosopher, born in San Francisco in 1940 and raised in Hong Kong. He founded Jeet Kune Do, his own martial arts philosophy built on the principle of using no fixed style, adapting fluidly to whatever the moment required rather than being locked into a single method. He died in 1973 at 32, leaving behind notebooks filled with philosophical reflections, aphorisms, and observations that were compiled posthumously in Striking Thoughts, Bruce Lee's Wisdom for Daily Living, where this quote appears. Now let's dive into the quote. There are two people in this sentence, and the contrast between them is the whole point. The wise man receives a foolish question, something naive, obvious, perhaps even irritating to someone with more knowledge, and somehow extracts more from it than a fool extracts from a wise answer delivered directly to them. How does that work, and what does it say about the nature of wisdom itself? Let's start with the fool and the wise answer, because that's the more intuitive half. A wise answer, clear, accurate, well-reasoned, lands in front of someone who isn't equipped to receive it, not because the answer is poorly constructed, but because the receiver lacks the framework to integrate it. Understanding isn't just about the quality of the information, it's about the readiness of the person receiving it. You can hand someone the most precise and useful answer imaginable, and if they don't have the curiosity, the humility, or the existing foundation to absorb it, it passes through without leaving much behind. This connects to something Major Dick Winters understood as a leader, that you cannot simply tell people what they need to know and expect it to stick. The preparation has to come first. The receptivity has to be built. A wise answer delivered to an unprepared mind is largely wasted, however accurate it may be. Now, the more interesting half, the wise man and the foolish question. What does a foolish question actually offer someone genuinely wise? Quite a lot, it turns out. A question that seems naive often reveals an assumption the questioner is making, an assumption that the wise person may have long since forgotten they once made, or one that the expert has been making unconsciously for years without examining. When someone asks, why does this work the way it does? In an area where you've been operating on autopilot, it can force you to articulate something you've never had to put into words. And in that articulation, you sometimes discover that your understanding was less solid than you thought. There is also something about foolish questions that cuts through the accumulated complexity experts tend to build around subjects. The beginner's mind, a concept Lee borrowed directly from Zen philosophy, sees things the expert can no longer see because the expert's vision has been shaped by everything they've learned. The expert knows too much to ask the simple question. The beginner asks it anyway. And in the gap between the expert's polished answer and the beginner's innocent question, something new sometimes appears. Lee's entire martial arts philosophy was built on this principle. Jeet Kune Do explicitly rejected fixed forms and rigid styles, not because tradition is worthless, but because the person who is locked into a single method cannot adapt when the situation changes. Sun Tzu made the same argument 2,000 years earlier. Let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. The wise fighter, like the wise thinker, stays fluid, and fluidity requires the willingness to be questioned, even foolishly. Grace Hopper warned us that the most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it that way." The foolish question is often just that phrase flipped into genuine curiosity. But why do we do it this way? And the person wise enough to take it seriously, rather than dismiss it, is the one who keeps learning past the point where expertise usually stops producing growth. Lao Tzu observed that he who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know, pointing at the relationship between deep knowledge and the compulsion to perform it. There's a related idea here. The truly wise person doesn't need the foolish question to confirm how much they know. They can engage with it without ego because their self-worth isn't riding on being the smartest person in the room. That security, the same security Freud noticed when he wrote about boldness arriving with the certainty of being loved, is what makes genuine learning possible at any stage of expertise. Without it, the foolish question is an annoyance. With it, the foolish question is an opportunity. There's also something worth naming about what this quote implies for the people asking the foolish questions. We've all been in situations where we hesitated to ask something because it seemed too basic, too obvious, too likely to reveal that we don't belong in the room. That hesitation is almost always about ego, specifically about the fear of being perceived as less than we want to be perceived. And what Lee is quietly pointing out is that the people genuinely worth learning from don't experience your honest question as a burden. They experience it as an opening. The ones who make you feel foolish for asking are usually the ones who have the most to protect. John Wooden built his entire coaching philosophy on the idea that character, what you actually are, matters infinitely more than reputation, what others think you are. The wise person in this quote is someone whose relationship to knowledge is based on character rather than reputation. They don't need the foolish question to go away. They need it to teach them something, and it usually does. Now here's the honest counterpoint. Not every foolish question is a gift. Some questions are foolish because the person asking them has made no effort to think before asking, and consistently rewarding intellectual laziness with patient wisdom is its own kind of poor teaching. Lee wasn't arguing for the abolition of standards or the pretense that all questions are equally valuable. He was arguing that the wise person's default orientation toward questions, even uncomfortable, naive, or seemingly beneath their level, is curiosity rather than dismissal. The orientation is the thing. Lee packed more philosophy into 32 years than most people manage in a lifetime. He read voraciously across Eastern and Western traditions, trained obsessively, and thought deeply about the relationship between discipline, adaptability, and growth. The quote isn't incidental to his life. It describes how he lived it, perpetually questioning, perpetually learning, unwilling to let what he already knew prevent him from discovering what he didn't. "Be water," he famously said. "Don't be the glass that shapes the water. Be the water itself." The wise man and the foolish question. The fool and the wise answer. The difference isn't in the information. It's in the posture of the person receiving it. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one makes you a little more willing to ask the question you've been holding back, or a little more patient with the one someone just asked you, that's exactly what Lee was after. And consider this, wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.